Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Merch Buzz, the Career Advice Edition. What I want to do today is talk about two things that go together very well and that basically you can't create one thing without the other. The first thing that I'm talking about are cover letters. How to write a cover letter. We're going to discuss cover letters in general, the purpose of them, what the employers are looking for, and then also how cover letters get screened typically. The other thing that I want to talk about are accomplishment statements. Accomplishment statements are extremely important, not only to be included in the cover letter, but also your resume. And later on, when you get to the interview stage, you will transition from those accomplishment statements that you've mentioned on your documents, your cover letter and resume, and will expand on them as you're responding to behavioral questions. A lot of employers will be asking you behavioral type questions, and it all begins with your accomplishment statements, because if you do it correctly during the first step, which would be as you're submitting your documents, it will basically go from there, and you will keep expanding on those points that you yourself consider to be your strengths. And because this is the information that you control at this point, you really want to put your best skills out there for the employers to see. Now, there's definitely a fine line between selling yourself in a very positive way, in a very confident way, where you're talking about your skills, your qualifications that are required for that job that you're applying for, and being cocky, being, pretending that you're the smartest person in the room. You definitely don't want to do that, so we will talk about, how to write accomplishment statements and cover letters in a very professional, very competitive way. Let's start with cover letters. Why is your cover letter important in general? Keep in mind, first impressions count. That is why your cover letter is important. The other reason why cover letters are important is because of your competition. You want to get noticed above others. And how do you do that? You do that by making them short, to the point, and error-free. If your cover letter is going over one page, you're doing something wrong. It definitely needs to be under a page. And of course, depending on where you are in your career, they might be shorter, they might be longer, but definitely not over a page. You want the employer to be interested in reading your resume when they're done reading your cover letter. Let's talk about who reads your documents, who actually reviews your cover letter and your resume. Typically, there are two ways that your documents will be reviewed. First way is by a person, somebody from human resources, or it might go directly to your hiring manager. How is this done? It basically, think old school. This is done manually. People will actually sort through them. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprising to a lot of people, they spend 15 to 20 seconds on cover letters and they look for very specific words and phrases. We've done a lot of research and basically asked a number of hiring managers point blank and said, how long do you actually spend going through the cover letter and the resume of your applicants the first time? And the answer was 15 to 20 seconds. There was one person out of 10 or 12 that we asked who said that they spend about 3 to 5 minutes looking over the documents the first time. They spend about 10 minutes going over them the second time when they're deciding who they're going to interview. and then right before the interview, they might spend 10 to 15 minutes again going over it one more time so that they can prepare for the interview and they can ask very specific questions based on your experience and your past. The other way that your documents will be screened and read is by an automated system. This is basically a computer system that will do a scan of keywords that are important for that role, and those keywords will for sure be outlined in the job posting. So read the job posting very, very carefully as you're putting these documents together. So what do you do? How do you do this? Step one is you start with the job description. If we're bringing it back to the basics, if this is the first step, this is the first time you're putting this type of a document together, get a highlighter out and highlight all the skills and attributes that are required for that job. Again, this is directly stated on the job description. Are there any specific, for example, computer skills, technical skills, such as MS Office, AutoCAD, Python, depending on the jobs that you're applying to, depending on your background and your education? Are there any soft skills? These could be leadership skills, teamwork, communication skills, anything like that, customer service skills. Are there certain words that are mentioned several times? Pay attention to those things. Before moving to step 2, consider what are your skills. So, for example, did you develop any of these skills through your studies? For example, some of your academic courses, labs. Maybe you gained some of these skills through part-time work. Were you a math tutor? Were you a camp counselor? Produce clerk at a superstore? Baker at a coffee shop? Did you volunteer? So, for example, you can say that you were serving dinner at a retirement home. Were you coaching a soccer team? All of these are your skills. Let's say that you were in engineering or high school clubs. Mention those. These show your communication skills, organization skills, teamwork, problem solving, and working under pressure. Employers love people who work in the service industry, especially if you're a student, if you're looking for an internship and you're applying for your first job or maybe your second or third, or you're a new grad. These are the types of skills that stand out. Next thing, what you want to do is, once you've gone through all the skills and written these out in point form, go through your points and turn your points into sentences. You want to have about 3 or 4 paragraphs. First paragraph is the introduction. This is very simple. This states who you are and what job you're applying for. You can go into a little more detail and describe why you're interested in that specific company, just to basically show that you've done research and that you're very interested in that company and you're not using a generic document. Second paragraph can be something specific to your technical skills. This is where you talk about very important specific skills that are required for that job. After that, you go into third paragraph that would consist of non-technical skills. And then the last paragraph would be your conclusion, basically thanking the reader and saying, please feel free to contact me at any time. Some of the key tips for cover letters. And again, like I said at the beginning, this is a very short overview, excuse me, that basically just describes what the purpose is and what employers get out of it. So in summary, what you want to do when it comes to cover letters, you don't want it to be too long. You briefly want to state your key skills and experience. You want it to be error-free. make sure that you proofread it. Get a friend, get somebody who's never seen it before to read it over multiple times if needed. Tailor your cover letter and your resume to the job. Include keywords directly from the job posting. This is extremely important. Now that we've looked at cover letters in general, let's talk about accomplishment statements. Keep in mind, you will need, and it is advised that you include accomplishment statements on your cover letter and your resume. Again, like I said, keep these in mind because you will most likely be talking about these accomplishments during your interview. So, as I mentioned before, because this is the information that you control at this point, make sure that these are your strongest skills, your most valuable experiences that you're mentioning. That way you stand out amongst your competition when the employer is reading this. So what's the point of an accomplishment statement? Accomplishment statement clearly demonstrates your past ability to contribute to the productivity and profitability of the company by citing specific examples. As I mentioned earlier, later in an interview, these examples often form the basis for the questions you are asked. So showcase your strengths in your statement. The components of a well-written accomplishment include challenge, action, and result. Let's look at these individually one by one. Challenge. Ask yourself, under what circumstances or conditions did you do the work? So, for example, within tight time frames, with no supervision, or took on additional responsibilities while maintaining your current workload. So I'm going to read these out again just so it stands out to you. The challenge itself. Under what circumstances or conditions did you do the work? Some of the examples are within tight time frames, with no supervision, or you took on additional responsibilities while maintaining current workload. Then you move on to the action. In this case, talk about how you executed the accomplishment, what you did, and the strengths you used. Be very specific and use strong action verbs. Once you get your action, then you want to move on to the result. This is where you think about the business impact of your actions. So in this instance, for your result, include key deliverables, measurable standards, and contributions from the organization's perspective. To determine the result, you need to think about what would have happened if you did not do such a competent job. So for example, this is a very simple example. If filing is not done in a timely fashion or items are misfiled, your coworkers would not be able to find documents that could have had a serious adverse business impact. Accomplishment statements lead the reader to the conclusion you want him or her to have about you. This is why I keep repeating that this is the information that you control. So rather than telling the reader what to believe, you point out what you have actually achieved. For example, no employer will conclude that you're a high achiever simply because you say you are, but most employers will conclude that you're a high achiever when they read these accomplishment statements on your cover letter and your resume. Let's look at a few examples. I've prepared 3. A perfectly written accomplishment statement would sound something like this. Achieved a customer satisfaction rating of 99.9% by quickly developing a high level of proficiency on new software during a 2-month internship. I'll read this over again just so you can pay attention to it and also pay attention to each specific part that we've covered, which would be the challenge, action, and result. Achieved a customer satisfaction rating of 99.9% by quickly developing a high level of proficiency on new software during a 2-month internship. You're not leaving any mystery for the reader about what you've done and what you've accomplished. Second example. Exceeded monthly sales quotas consistently by an average of 15% for the 3 years by initiating a system of follow-up contacts with satisfied customers. I'll read it over again like I mentioned earlier, just so you can really take it in. Exceeded monthly sales quotas consistently by an average of 15% for the 3 years by initiating a system of follow-up contacts with satisfied customers. If you really think about it, there are so many things that you're hitting here that really stand out. So for example, exceeded monthly sales, right? Right away that stands out. Then you go further, you go into more detail. By an average of 15%, that's great. Now you've assigned a quantity to this. Then you go further. For the 3 years, so now you've given it a time frame. So now you've exceeded monthly sales quotas by an average of 15% for the 3 years, and then you go into how. By initiating a system of follow-up contacts with satisfied customers. Let's look at one more. Assisted in developing a promotional fundraising campaign that provided contributions exceeding $15,000, 3 times the previous record. Again, I'll go over it one more time. Assisted in developing a promotional fundraising campaign that provided contributions exceeding $15,000. This is 3 times the previous record. Again, very specific, and it basically goes into more detail and more of an explanation as you keep reading it. I'm going to start wrapping it up here. Basically, we've gone over enough detail for you to, listen to this a few times, pause it if you need to. But again, just to recap, cover letters and resumes are extremely important. That is what gets you the interview. Again, at this stage, this is the information that you control. So what you want to do is you want to write the best accomplishment statements that you can, because whatever you include in the accomplishment statements will guide the employer to further discuss this during an interview. So again, this is the information that you control. So talk about your best skills and your best accomplishments. As always, thank you very much for listening. If you have any comments, questions, or anything to add, please leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. And once again, thanks for listening.